All right, so picking up where I left off, I decided to make the inner A post fillers. Um, on my build and on Don's car, I was able to find some interior parts, plastic parts on my car in particular. It was a four doors, so I used part of the B pillar base section, and I was able to cut um, what I needed out of that plastic. This car has a different interior, and so obviously those parts are not available for me to cut at any rate. I wanted to get a little bit tighter fit around the roof area where it goes into the headliner, and also on the dash with this car, because it has a more rounded over shape. It's a little difficult to, you've got one shot to cut the plastic piece and make it fit 100%. And if you don't, you end up with gapping and stuff like that, which I have a little bit of that on my car, which I'm not 100% happy with, obviously. So what I did, I'm going to do these out of sheet metal. So of course, the first thing I did was on the back side here, right on this rim here, I bent a flange 3/4 of an inch, and then around another 3/4 of an inch, and then I took a 1/4 of an inch and I bent it again, so that the whole thing had a slight U shape to it to go wrap around, and it would project out a little bit, give me a little thickness over there. Once I had that established, shrunk and stretched to the shape, I went ahead and I made this paper pattern. It's kind of hard to see here. Let me zoom this thing out a little bit. There you go. Hopefully that's better. At any rate, to get this to fit around and complete the transition to the headliner right there with this little piece of quarter round stuck up in there. Also, what I wanted to do is, because of the way this tapers in over here, it necessarily meant that this corner here had to be open in over here in order to get this piece in and out. If you ever wanted to, in the future, pull this piece out, if it tapered in here, it'd be wedged in underneath the glass, and there'd be no way to get it out of the car. So I had to create a little foot over here. You can see that on the paper pattern. Now on this sheet metal piece, it's going to be mudded in here, kind of a taper, so it blends in. It's more of a molded look. Also, you see there's a hard line in here. I wanted to put some shape into this pillar, so I just put a crease in the paper pattern, but I went ahead and used the English wheel to create some curvature in this piece over here. Now the whole thing's going to be covered with black vinyl, so in the end it'll be upholstered. But also in the process, what I had to do was to, sorry about the hand there, I'm kind of working left-handed here, a little awkward. But you can see I've got a kind of a stack of nuts. I've been building that out so that I have a real nice firm threaded location. Normally I would just thread this, and with the plastic pieces there was enough tension on the plastic that you could tighten it up with the screw, and it wouldn't collapse because it was more rigid than the sheet metal. But the sheet metal will collapse in, so I have to kind of build this out with, first I threaded the A-post substructure here with a 1024 tap, and then I put one nut on and welded it, tested it out. It pulled it in too far. Now I've got a second nut built up over here, making sure that the threads are aligned when I weld it in, so that I don't have a problem getting it in there. So at any rate, what I've ended up with here is this is my cover. As you can see, it's got quite a bit of curve here on the back side of it, and then it's also got a little bit of curve in this direction here. But here's the foot that I was talking about, and of course this will get bondoed in over here so that this is more of a molded shape. It allows me to also come in here and get this a little smoother, and you can see I have it's rounded over on the top side over here to give this some shape in this direction. And then I was also able to taper it out at the top so that it blends into the headliner a little bit better than I have been able to get in the past. And I came up with a little trick here to countersink the sheet metal. you know, if you use a regular countersink bit, it's going to leave very little metal for the screw head to grip. You know, I've got these stainless steel oval heads that I like to use for the A-pillars. And as you can see on the back side of these, it's like a little volcano. So it creates a little bit more of a land for the sheet metal screw to hold on to. And the way I achieved that was, after I had my holes drilled and located, I took a piece of solid stock here and I drilled and tapped a hole and countersunk this hole, and then put this piece on top and tightened it down to create that countersink. And so I have a little bit more metal than you would normally have if you used just a countersink bit to cut a countersink into this surface over here. So anyway, that's what I'm up to. Long-winded, but it was touch and go, so I didn't feel like dragging you through the whole back and forth process of figuring out how I was going to do that. Okay, so that's what it looks like in place after a bunch of tweaking. The good thing about sheet metal is you can move it around till everything fits exactly how you want it to fit. So that's what I got going over here. I'll show you what I meant about that back flange over here. So you can see there's a back flange here that wraps around the inside of the A-post, and then it finishes out to that taper on the top. It blends into the headliner. Anyway, this one's pretty much done. Got to move to the other side. One of the tricks to developing a pattern that's within two confining points, this being the roof and of course the top of the dashboard here. If I was to make this out of one piece of paper, obviously, you know, I'd be trimming it to the point where something wouldn't fit, obviously. So I split it into two halves, which allows me to telescope it. In other words, as I trim and fit this bottom piece to the top of the dashboard, and as I trim and fit this to the roof panel, I'm able to, if I get the angle wrong a little bit, I can trim it off, just move it apart a little bit, retape it, and that helps me to develop both ends of the pattern independently, and then I end up with a more accurate fit in my final piece. All right, I wasn't able to show you on the other side because I was busy figuring out how I was going to do this process. So anyway, this is what I ended up with. This is the first piece I developed. It's the piece that fits on the back side. This fits in here like this. This is the back side, and then I have this here bent at a 45-degree angle, and eventually that'll get it smoothed over to just a round over. But I start with this piece because I can shrink it and stretch it so that it contours in both directions to this A-pillar bottom side. Anyway, now that that's clecoed into place, I can make sure that I can develop a pattern on the opposite side. It's also good, you know, to break it up into smaller pieces, because then you can get these angles, you know, perfect as you can, as far as how it blends in and everything, and how it interacts or interfaces with the dashboard. Anyway, I just thought I'd show you that step of it. I just thought I'd show you how this simple dimple die or countersink works. You can see that's countersunk there. That's just a regular 3/16 hole. Got a sacrifice screw over here. And just going to tighten it down into the die. As you can see, it's countersinking the sheet metal down like that. Back it off. Now the thing that has to be remembered is that because it's a countersunk screw, that the surface area below, because this is like a little volcano here, so you basically have to relieve the area that it screws into using a countersink below, so that the bottom edge of the screw, basically this slope here, ends up you know, not bottoming out. So you can see that has to be countersunk onto the surface that you screw it to. Anyway, thought I'd show you that. Okay, so this might seem unrelated to the work I'm doing around the dashboard, but I couldn't really complete the inner doors, speaker locations and things like that until I got the dashboard itself in, so I could see where it extends into the face of the door. And also I have to make an interface that'll pick up the ducting that goes from the side of the dashboard into the door and then up to the glass. But before I can do all that, before I hang the door, I wanted to complete, there's a small opening at the front of the door that I cut out of the Challenger door, and this accepts the other half of the rubber boot that protects the wiring going into the door from the door pillar. So rather than try to cut this hole in that piece of sheet metal right there, I've gone ahead and just cut this piece out because it's a little thicker than that, and so the boot will pop onto this properly. This is what was in the Challenger. So at any rate, so this is a little easier just to put the whole thing in like this than to try and go back and forth, popping the boot in and out to make sure that it'll actually snap into the hole after you cut a hole. At any rate, that's what I'm up to right now. Alright, so this is what it's looking like with that piece mended in there. So now I got to just go ahead and remount the door on the car and see what kind of issues I run into trying to align that vent with the inner door here. See what goes on. Okay, so this is a driver's side door. I went ahead and mounted the passenger side door because I wanted to see how everything was going to translate from the dashboard and into the door, and see what I had to do for the ducting. And I got completely off track with all of that because there were just so many other issues going on. You see all this beautiful work that I did to mount this motor and this location and everything. Well, I started cutting apart the door panels because I wanted to get the lower section of the door panel and start fitting it and see what kind of things were in the way, and it turns out pretty much everything. So I'll show you what I ended up with. Here's the lower section of the door that I wanted to maintain. I wanted to maintain this. I started out with just a speaker, considering the speaker grill. I was placing the speaker grill in the door. Then I got to looking at all of this and wondering how far in all of this needed to be cleared, because this sweeps in on a curve like this to take in. There's an upper detail in this, of course, which we don't have any room for this piece, but we'll have to make a custom piece that mimics this piece, and this basically goes on top, and it has a detail. This can be changed to a different color fabric. It generally is, to give the interior a little bit more interest. And then there's a top piece that goes over top of that right here. This has the interface with the door. Naturally, this is way too thick. There's zero room left between the door and the dash at this point, so I'm just looking at this for basically how I have to make the interface. There's a rubber gasket that goes in here, and then there's a vent that comes out of the top here. All of this, there's no room for this particular setup, and there's no room for this whole upper panel because the door is much shorter. It's almost 4 inches shorter than the Challenger door. The other issue is, as you can see from the front here, the way it's trimmed is because of the door pillars leaning in, this thing has to be trimmed on an angle, and you can see already up to about here I almost have no material left. So that means that all of this has to sweep to the inside of the door, where you saw I have all of that, the window motor mounted and everything else. So I've been playing around with the whole situation over here, and what I ended up doing is, as you could see, I had to clear out and remount the motor lower in the door in order to miss all of that stuff, take out all of that sheet metal that I had in here, Fortunately, I had already run a 5/8 piece of tubing across the top, which was really what was making the door substantial. And then I took some 065 wall 3/8 tubing and bent it in this direction, sweeping in and putting the motor in as close as I could to the window regulator itself. So this is about, we're looking at about a 1/2 inch off of the window regulator. So the motor had to be moved in probably 3/4 inch from where I had it. I don't know why I had it out that far. I guess I was just optimistic because this pocket is so big on the back of the last car. There was plenty of room for everything. Of course, that was 2011, and since 2012, everything's different. So I had to cut out all of this over to here. But before I did, I went ahead and I re-supported everything with 3/8 065 wall tubing that's curved inboard, and then I made new motor mounts on either side for the window motor. And this is where it all started. I just had this tacked in place, and I started doing the placement just to see. So basically, now we can come inboard of what was the sheet metal of the door and get the armrest in and upright how it's supposed to be as it relates to this door jamb. And you can see the situation going on here. There's a crossover point here where this sticks out further. Got that end cap on, by the way. That just fits. I hope it fits on the other side. We'll see how that goes. But I'm going to have to clear out some of this metal here, also flatten this out, and then I'll have to make a transition piece right here and get the vent to come up straight over here for the air that's coming out here to clear off the side windows. So a little backing up, but it had to be done. There's no way to see this ahead of time, really, unless you've got spare door panels hanging around that you can play with. You don't want to start cutting up the good stuff until it's absolutely necessary, which that's where I'm at right now. So in order to continue on, I have to put this plastic sill plate that captures the rug in order to see how this interacts with that door panel, because that door panel is going to come inboard here, and I have to position that exactly where it's going to go to where that's got enough spacing. Also at the bottom, once this is tapped in, there should just be enough gap for the rug to capture the rug here. But I want to see what that looks like as far as how the door itself, at the bottom of the door, interacts. Make sure I've got enough room that it clears and there's nothing that has to be done to the door or to the sill. One thing I did have to do to the sill is, we put that frame rail, that 2x4 frame rail inside this frame rail here in the beginning. Well, these little clips push into the top here, and they will hit that frame rail in certain areas. So what I've done is I've drilled a couple of holes on either end of the existing slots that these clips go into, and then went ahead and then took a air saw and cut it out, pulled out the little piece of metal in order to have enough clearance down there so that these clips don't bottom out on that frame rail. Okay, so this is stage one, just getting the this bottom base, which holds the armrest, the controls for the windows, the door latch, and then the map pocket, and actually that's a cup holder, but anyway, just getting the speaker mounted as far in as possible, and that's about as far as it'll go. I went ahead and just trimmed this away completely. I'm going to draw that back just a little bit so we can open the side of the glove box. Right now it's just scraping it a little bit. Hopefully we can just kind of tug on this. I'll get rid of this little rib here so that this goes a little soft here. We'll just draw that in and reshape that a little bit, because we've got a little bit of room here between the face of the speaker. I can see I can put my finger down in there. It's touching at the bottom, but it's got a little space here, so we can draw it in a little bit like that, because we'll be making a custom panel up in this area over here. As you can see here, the motor clears now. It's in that cavity there, and we're right up against these little posts here, so I got a little bit of room. I can kind of just draw it out just a little bit so that I can feed my panel in here, and of course build the whole top out.
over here. The speakers is back as far as it'll go, and it has clearance for this nut over here, which basically clamps the glass in. This nut will be further in once it's tightened down, but had to make sure all of this stuff on the back side of the speaker was going to clear, and then also that the speaker was far enough back that it wouldn't interfere with the door jamb in the front side. Anyway, so just nickel and diming it here, trying to keep an eye on everything as I go, because you can get carried away here and start finishing things up, and then you go to close it and something's jammed up. Kind of hard to see because this is the side you'd never see if the skin was on the door. But one of the advantages of working without a skin on the door is I can get in here without having to take this panel back off a bunch of times and fabricate different brackets that are needed to tie this panel to the frame of the door. Anyway, what we have here is we've got one bracket in here that connects to these two upright rods right here, and it's a bent of 90. It's 60 thousandths, and it's basically got a weld nut on the back side, and that basically there's a nut on the inside right here, so that when you pull on this, the whole panel doesn't come off with the door. That secures this panel when you open the door with that lever. The other one is a nut straight down through this. This one's for grabbing the whole door and pulling the door shut with some force. So right here is, I've got this is like about 80 thousandths steel. I've just got it tacked in here, but this is a bracket that's bent over here, and it has a weld nut on the bottom side, and it's fed through the top of the door. And then of course there's a cover plate that goes over here, and those two are secure now. That's basically a finished deal. It also lets me observe, where the empty spaces are, because I have a bunch of modules that have to be mounted in here also, and I have to find the empty pockets to put them in. It's nice not having to run any rods for this door opening mechanism. This just pops in right there to that keeper, and then right into here, so that this is a very easy thing to install. The last car I had a bunch of rods that had to be connected, and you just have to make sure you've got a clear gangway for wherever they're going. So anyway, that's where I'm at with this. Alright, so this is the actual project that I was trying to start when I got involved with all the other stuff that I had to locate to make sure that I was in the right spot for all of this. So, as with everything else, you got to do everything before you can do anything. So, what I went ahead and did was I reinforced this area here with some 5/8 all the way over to this plating over here, and then I also reinforced it here so that I could open up a big enough hole here so that I could create a ductwork to replace this ductwork, which obviously is not going to work in this situation. I can use the rubber gasket if I'm clever enough. We'll see how that goes. And then the actual duct will be part of this inner door, just be built in and integral to it. But some of the challenges involved here, to get this door back open over here, is this is the inner door upper structure, that basically the starter strip for it, and that hangs on the top there, but that window whisker on there. So I'm beginning a clearing operation over here as to how that's going to look relative to this piece over here. But also I have to figure out a way to get this grill, this little diverter grill, into the top of this piece here. So that's what I'm puzzling over now. It's really making some steam come off of my head, but anyway, we'll just keep whittling away at it here. This is the type of thing that you have to kind of have to go back and forth with a couple of times before you get it, because there's lots to be considered here. Alright, so this is what it's looking like so far. This area here has just been clearanced for everything. I'll have to do my boxing later on when I see just how everything else fits. But this is my top of my door panel here, my starter piece I should say, because it's actually, I got to develop it out in a number of ways. I just get it over here, get it to fit where it belongs, which is right over there to the end. Alright, so that's us right there. And this is the little vent piece that's going to fit on the top there. Now you can see that once that's in there, it just guides into this back pocket here, and I'll have to just basically design this back pocket in order to transfer the air from that into this area here and then up through that vent. But anyway, I mean, it just fits. There's not another 1/8 inch to spare there. Front to back, side to side, it's all very tight. Okay, so I've got this panel built into the door now. It's recessed from this feature that's on the stock Charger door panel. Anyway, so I've got this flushed in like this so that it'll roll against that opening here. And I haven't made my ductwork yet, but as you can see, that rubber boot now lines up with this little air duct here. And now I'll just have to create a small enclosure here to guide up to my grill over here, and then I'll be finished with that one little enclosure there. All right, the next step is to create these 2 vertical walls over here. Start creating a box for the duct to guide the air into this piece. So you can see I'm starting to close in around the actual vent piece over here. The last part I have to do now is to construct the back wall of this box and weld it in. Before I put the back piece onto that little ductwork that I made, I got ahead and taken some T21, and I know a number of people have asked what I use, but I use this T21 fusor. It's got a slow pop time, about 4 hours, but so it gives you a little bit of time to work with it. But they come with mixing nozzles, just a couple, but I use such small quantities of this stuff for various things that I just squeeze it out onto a pad like this and mix it up like Bondo and apply it with whatever, depending on the what I'm doing. But anyway, I just thought I'd show you that, and I'll show you how basically this is maybe a little bit of overkill, but I went ahead and sealed the inside corners of this little duct. I'll apply a little bit more to the inside corners of this before I put this piece back on here and tack it into place. Alright, that's finally what it looks like with the back piece both epoxied on, and then I've got some of that rubber water sealant tape around the seams. Anyway, moving on to the next thing. Alright, I'm going about securing things and tidying things up here a bit now that I'm pretty confident of the general location of a lot of this stuff. Still haven't mounted any mounting positions for all the different modules that go in here yet, but there seems to be a pretty big open cavity here, and hopefully I won't have any problems. Anyway, so I've gone and secured this backer plate for the speaker to the sheet metal, and then also to these stiffening struts over here so that this is nice and solid here. I've gone about clearancing this out because this is right on top of the motor for the window mechanism, and so this is while this bolt goes through here, it doesn't touch the motor, but this crossed over where one of the mounting bolts is for the motor plate itself. So I had to create a situation where I just put a little heavy washer here to join the 2 of these together and welded them back up over here. This being the place where you pull the door open, I have backstopped these with a 3/8 065 wall tubing down to this strut over here so that it has doesn't have a tendency to want to roll, and it also so that it doesn't want to turn in this direction. So it's a good pull spot now, and that goes to the top of the armrest. Okay, so I'm working on creating a flange that will secure all the components across the top of this panel, this lower panel here, and also give me a panel to create some points where I can secure this to the inner door frame. And in addition to that, what I'm doing is I'm providing a little bit of a gapped area here. As you can see, this is this represents a panel that will slide in back behind here, which will be a detail panel somewhat like this one here, modified smaller, obviously. As you can see, this worked that way. This slid in behind that armrest. So that's what I'm doing over here. Also, I've kind of separated this and pulled this back so this is a little bit flatter, so I don't have any problems, hopefully, with the opening up the glove box door with the door closed. So as you can see, I've got I'll have a gap all the way along here to slide a panel in. And so very tedious. Got to keep looking at it and looking at it and looking at it because everything's plastic. There's really hardly any place to really attach anything, so I've got to be very careful that it's all strong enough that it holds up. Anyway, that's where I am on this thing. All right, with a little bit of back and forth, I finally got this thing ready to go on and fastened it with countersink steel rivets to the attachment points that formerly were screwed through the other plastic architecture that's no longer here. Anyway, what I didn't show you is on this front side of these is I had made some 1/8-inch spacers that I welded to the front side here in order to make sure that this panel stood off from this armrest over here in order to maintain that gap on the front side, so I could slide my upper panel down through there. I had mentioned in the last clip that I'd hoped to roll this in and get this flatter, which I was on my way to doing that, but it just basically what ended up happening was this inner plastic grill here for the speaker was hitting the housing of the actual speaker, and the speaker couldn't be moved further into the door because it's just missing the carrier for the glass right now for the window regulator, so the speaker can't be put in any deeper than it is already. On the last car, I didn't have that issue because it had a vent window. It wasn't one continuous piece of glass, so the regulator wasn't in this area, so I was able to move the speaker in. Even at that, I had to trim the glove box door on that car because the armrest was longer and glove box door ran into the armrest. At any rate, this one has a different issue. It hits this area where the emblem is down to about here. It'll open, but it's just basically squeezing the plastic back and forth. It can't be held back there because it's actually deforming around the speaker itself. This is being pushed in against the speaker. So I'll have to trim that door off, and not the greatest tragedy, but I would have liked to have avoided it, but it's a different door panel, different problems. So I'm going to put this on at this stage here and see what I've got. Okay, so that's what it's looking like so far from the inside of the car. Lots of work more to do, obviously. It's definitely going to have to get trimmed. This door is going to definitely have to get trimmed, this glove box door. While it does open, it does push on this panel in the front, and like I said, it's up against the speaker itself on the back side. So obviously this is all going to be different on top here. This is just the substructure that hangs the window whisker, and you can see that that's where the vent has been filled in over here. And so yeah, it's a lot of back and forth and a lot of ciphering, as they say. And I'll be hopefully moving on from here, but not next week. Next week I have to travel with to go visit with family for a week, and so I will see you in 2 weeks. And until then, thanks to everybody for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.